Well, hey everybody, welcome to today's ACE event. This is part of the PACER Ready series designed to help you be successful students here at USC Aiken. Today's event is called PACER Ready, Learning How to Learn Online. So today we're going to learn some strategies for being effective in online courses, how to manage your cognitive load, how to stay engaged, and how to overall succeed in those online courses to meet your ultimate educational goals, right? So excited to have all of you today. By a show of hands, how many of you have taken an online class before? Awesome, so all of you actually, that's fantastic to hear. Did you find any ways that those online classes maybe differed from some of your face-to-face courses? Were there any unique challenges or opportunities that presented themselves that were different than a face-to-face course? Maybe nothing standing out at the moment? Well, online classes can actually be a little bit different than face-to-face courses. Online learning is really a new frontier that's emerged in the last couple years. We're definitely seeing an increase across higher education in the number of online courses that are available. And online courses are a really cool opportunity because they're helping change how you access material, right? Maybe for your own schedules, you've seen how convenient it can be to take an online class. Or maybe there were no seats available in online class or in a face-to-face class, but that online class provided another opportunity for you to learn and continue your educational goals, right? So it's really awesome to have these online opportunities at your disposal. However, there are some unique challenges that can present themselves and some unique ways that you might need to adapt your learning styles and strategies to be successful in an online class compared to how you would traditionally have been successful in a face-to-face course. So I'm excited to talk with you today about how you can be successful in this modern type of format for education. So why exactly can online courses be tricky? So I mentioned they're a little different. In what ways are they different, right? Well, first of all, online classes offer a lot more flexibility. That's something that a lot of us really love about online classes. If you have a busy work schedule or busy athletic schedule or busy schedule with your family, it can be hard sometimes to find the time to go to a face-to-face class. And so that online flexibility is hard to beat. However, what that flexibility also means is that it's really going to require a lot of self-discipline and engagement to stay focused in that online course. If you're not meeting in a classroom every day with an instructor sitting right in front of you, walking you through the course material, that means it's up to you in your own time to dedicate some space to sit down and work through that online course material to make sure that you're learning as much as possible and meeting those course objectives and staying engaged with that course material. I have a really interesting statistic to share with you guys. So research shows that 87% of college students report better grades when they improve their time management skills. That's a pretty important statistic. And that statistic is even increased further with online classes, right? So time management becomes really crucial when it's completely up to you to find the time and the space to engage with that course material, right? A second reason why online learning can be a little bit of a challenge is the isolation factor, right? So when you're in a face-to-face class, again, you have your instructor there, probably checking in on you a little more frequently to make sure that you're, getting all the support you need. You're gonna have peers likely sitting right next to you in the classroom, chatting with you about what's happening in the class. You can easily ask questions, just raise your hand and chime in, right, and have those good face-to-face conversations. However, in an online course, it's really up to you to facilitate that conversation, right? If you want to chat with your instructor, you're going to have to email them or message them or schedule an appointment with them or a video call with them, right? If you want to chat with your classmates, it's up to you to converse with them in the course dialogue or to send them an email, right? So that conversation and that engagement really kind of falls down to you rather than just occurring kind of spontaneously and naturally in the classroom setting. So making sure you stay engaged and don't feel as isolated in a course is really important to do. It just takes a little bit more intentionality, right? The third reason why online learning can be a little bit complicated is distraction overload. I don't know about you, but when I'm at home, it seems like there's a million different things going on at any given point. I realize there's chores I need to do around the house, or maybe I need to run errands, or maybe the dog's barking, or your phone is buzzing. Who knows? Could be a variety of things happening at any given time, right? Compared to kind of a quiet, dedicated classroom space that makes it a little bit easier to focus, home can feel distracting at times, right? Obviously, home's our comfort spot. It's so nice to be home. Again, it offers that flexibility and comfortability. However, there's also a million other things that can pull your attention in other directions. So with online courses, it's important to try and stay focused and not let those distractions get the better of you. So here's kind of the picture we can paint, right? You've got tabs open all over the place, both mentally and, like actually in front of you on your computer. You've got notifications going off. Your phone may be ringing. You might be getting Blackboard notifications. You might not really have a strong plan for what you're going to do at a given point. You're just trying to figure out how to engage with the course and what you're supposed to do. You might sit there trying to look through the course for a couple hours. And since you don't have a clear plan, nothing really gets done, right? And so you're kind of in limbo, feeling like I've spent a lot of time on this, but I haven't actually done anything yet. And I feel like I'm losing track of the course, right? So it can be really easy to feel scattered with online learning. So what we want to create instead is this picture that you see here on the right, where it's a dedicated space for learning, a clear schedule that allows plenty of time for you to stop and learn that material. You're tackling one task at a time so that it's manageable and things are broken into bite-sized pieces that are easy to understand and engage with. So if you really design an environment for success, you're going to be so much more likely to meet your goals in an online class, right? Making sure you have a distraction-free zone for studying, making sure that you are working on creating a priority list and tackling those items is all really important. We're going to talk about some specific strategies today on how exactly you can do all of that. So here's technique 1. This is mastering your environment and your time. So it's really important to note that where and when you study really can matter just as much as how hard you study. Is that something you've ever comprehended before or ever thought about before, right? I don't know about you, but certainly if I'm in different spaces, I'll study differently. So for instance, one night this week, I was with some friends at a crowded restaurant, and we were all just kind of hanging out, and it was very casual. And I had a paper I was supposed to be writing. And so I thought, let me multitask. I'll hang out with my friends in this crowded, loud, fun restaurant, and I'll write my paper. So I start to write my paper, I pull up the instructions for the assignment, and I sit there over and over reading those assignment instructions, trying to understand exactly what it was I was supposed to be doing. It was a bit more of a complex assignment. And after I had somewhat read the assignment instructions like 3 times, I realized I'm not comprehending what these instructions are even asking me to say. So at that point, I ended up putting my laptop away for that time being, hung out with everybody a little bit longer, and then ended up going home to write in a space where it was quiet and I could focus. So that shows that when and where you study really does make a difference. If you're in a space really not conducive for studying and working, you might sit there trying to work and putting in your best effort and just not achieving the results that you want, right? So starting off in a nice space at a time that's conducive to studying is really important. The when part really does matter too. For you all, I can imagine you've probably been like me, and at some point you've been studying for a test or a quiz late at night. Maybe you've had a full day, you didn't have time to look over the course material sooner, and so you find yourself middle of the night trying to prep for that assessment that's coming up. And as you're reviewing that material, sometimes if it's too late at night, it's really hard to comprehend it. It might just go right over your head. You might read a textbook page 2 or 3 times in a row, and that material does not stick with you, right? So the when can really matter too. Make sure it's a time that's conducive to studying. If you're an early bird, study in the morning. If you're a night owl, maybe study in the evening. Overall, make sure that you're studying at times that you're awake and alert and that you feel prepared to engage with that course material, right? So all of that is super important for your environment and the time, right? So something else that can be really important to consider is the type of space that you're working in. So a really neat article from Princeton University showed that students who work in an organized, clutter-free space significantly improved their information processing efficiency and sustained focus compared to students who worked in more messy, cluttered, unorganized spaces. This really seems to help shift your brain into like study and work mode, right? So I think that that's really important to keep in mind, right? So not only are we wanting to maintain all those other attributes we talked about earlier, like maybe minimizing loud, noisy spaces, right? We might also want to, again, make sure our space is clean. That could be as simple as straightening up your desk before you get to work, organizing some of your papers or your textbooks or resources that you're using so that everything's clean and easy for you to find. It might even be a virtual cleanup, exiting some of those browsers on your laptop. It's so easy to end up with so many tabs open, right? And that can be distracting, especially if you're trying to do research online and constantly having to scroll through a bunch of different tabs to find the online resources you're looking at. So consider both a physical cleanup of your space and a virtual one too on your computer or other device that you're working on. Also consider proper lighting. You know, especially now when we do so much work on our mobile devices or our laptop, it's easy to sit somewhere in the dark and just count on our screens to light up and, you know, enough for us to see what we're doing. However, that can really cause a lot of eye strain, make it hard to focus as well. So if you're in a space that has good lighting, like a lamp or an overhead light, that can be great. Natural lighting can be good too to help you focus, so consider that if possible. Maybe sitting near a window if you have one, opening the blinds and enjoying some of that natural light. Also consider the seating you're in. I know it's very tempting to want to work from your bed, or for me, I like to work from the couch sometimes. However, if you get a little too comfortable, sometimes that can distract you. So if you have some good, comfortable, yet ergonomic seating, maybe a nice desk chair or something else you can sit in, that works out really well. Maybe a chair at a kitchen table can be a good combination of both comfortable but not so comfortable that you're losing focus there. And overall, make sure you have all your materials within arm's reach. That can really help limit distractions overall, which is helpful. You know, maybe if you need, like I said, maybe some resources, maybe a notebook with some study notes in it, whatever else that you need, have them all right within arm's length so that you don't have to get up and go obtain those things throughout your study or work session, right? You can just sit down, really get in the groove, and have everything right there that you need at your hands reach. Also consider putting your phone on silent or maybe even putting it in another room. It can be really easy for our phones to serve as distractions when we're trying to work. So sometimes it can be really helpful to just block off a period of time where you maybe go put your phone in another room for an hour or so and know that you're going to spend that hour working consistently and not checking your phone to limit distractions and maximize your productivity. Also consider using the same consistent location for studying if possible. Maybe for instance, in your dorm room or your house, you have one area set up for doing homework and you work there as frequently as you can. And that really helps produce an environment that you're used to studying in, that you're accustomed to working in, so that your mind instantly shifts straight into work or study mode when you sit down there. That can be really helpful. If you like working in the library, that can also be very helpful to have that same repeated location that you're using as your dedicated study space. Now let's talk about the power a schedule can have for your study routine. So it's really important with an online class to make sure that you're up to date on dates and deadlines. In a face-to-face class, you have the benefit of your instructor or your peers in the class, maybe pretty consistently talking about upcoming deadlines and assignments and things that are up ahead, right? In an online class, that's a little bit different, right? You're likely going to have reminders through the online course. However, for some students, those can be a little bit easier to miss. So I really recommend trying your hardest to stay up to date on all of the dates that are of importance in a course. One way to do this that's really, really helpful is to take the syllabus and course schedule at the beginning of the semester and write down all of those dates that your instructor gives you and create your own matrix for how you're going to approach those assignments and how you're going to get everything done. This might look a little bit different for everybody. Maybe you utilize your phone calendar and that's helpful. For some of us, I know the Outlook calendar can be a really helpful way to keep track of important dates and deadlines. Or maybe you really like a paper calendar or planner. Whether you prefer the virtual, the digital, or the traditional paper format, any of those can be a great option. Just choose one that seems to work really smoothly for you, something that'll be consistent, that's easy for you to keep up with, and that you'll be able to maintain throughout the semester. Something that you'll be able to check easily and often, right? So I really think that helping eliminate surprises can go a long way in success in online courses. So as long as you know what's coming up, you're going to be so much less likely to miss important dates and deadlines, which is really going to boost your overall participation in the course, which is going to increase your understanding and your ability to achieve the learning objectives in that course. Another thing that can be really helpful when you're working out a calendar for the course of all your important dates and deadlines is to consider breaking down some larger assignments. So in some of your undergraduate courses, some of your intro level courses, you maybe had some scaffolded projects. Maybe in an English 101 or 102 course at some point, maybe even in high school, you had to submit a topic first. And then you had to submit an outline for a paper. And then you had to submit a rough draft, right? And then you had to submit your final draft. That's what scaffolding is called, where the assignment is broke down into multiple parts. This can be a really effective way to keep up to date with all the activities and assignments in an online course. Even if your instructor doesn't break down assignments in this way, this can be something very effective for you to do on your own as a student. So when you're making up your calendar for the course, if you know you have a really large assignment that you can't complete in just one day, right? Planning ahead can be helpful. So rather than just writing on your calendar 10-page paper due on, Friday, April 6th, you might instead break that into several smaller points, right? So maybe 2 weeks prior, you write on your calendar, rough draft of this assignment due. And then maybe another spot on your calendar, you write down, visit the writing center to have my essay proofread, right? And then maybe you have another spot on your calendar where you write, contact instructor to ask questions about final draft, right? However you need to break that down, I recommend doing so just to make it a little bit more manageable. And that really helps prevent that last minute rush, right? As that assignment kind of looms overhead and it feels like a lot to tackle. It's a lot easier if you break it down beforehand, right? Do we have any questions yet? Great, so let's talk a little bit more about how to plan, right? So creating a weekly schedule that works for you is a really effective way to succeed in an online class. So if you sit down and plan your week ahead of time, maybe on a Saturday or a Sunday, and you plan out what the following week is going to look like, studies show that students who do that are going to have a lot less stress in online classes than other students who just got to take things a day at a time and tackle things as they come. Again, why does this help? It's because it helps eliminate the surprises and helps you plan ahead, right? For online courses, there's a lot of activities that involve engagement all throughout the week. For some classes, maybe during the first few days of the week, you need to write an initial post on a discussion board. And then a few days later, you need to come back in and respond to some of your classmates. Being able to look at all those deadlines in your planner ahead of time and make a plan for when you're going to get those pieces of your assignments due ahead of time, again, can be really effective to making sure that you don't overlook or miss anything and that you can give the proper attention towards every piece of your online class as you need to. Think of your schedule as your roadmap, right? You know that you have certain activities and assessments coming up, and then you plan out your schedule to give yourself just enough time to work on it, right? There's only so many hours in the day, so making sure that you set aside those hours at a time that work for you to get through your course material is really going to be crucial, right? Otherwise, it might just slip your mind and not find enough time in your day-to-day schedule. Next, let's talk about how to engage your brain for deeper learning. So it's important to note that something like watching a lecture isn't the same as learning from it. Just like how I mentioned, I reread those assignment instructions multiple times and still didn't understand them. Reading something isn't the same, again, as learning and understanding from it. What we really want to make sure we're doing is having real in-depth engagement with the material in our online course, right? We want to make sure that that information sticks with us, right? Have you ever heard of something called passive learning? This is kind of where you're just sitting there and the information's kind of flowing by you. Some of it might kind of stick, right? But not most of it. What we really want to do is we really want to engage. We want to be active learners rather than just passive consumers. We don't want to just turn on a lecture in the background and let it play, or quickly glance at an article or a textbook reading, right? We want to actually engage with it. We want to process and connect with that information so that it sticks with us long term and we've actually learned from it. So there's a couple of techniques that you can think of to utilize in online courses to help be a more active learner. So for instance, if you're watching an online lecture or maybe a YouTube video or other virtual resource that your professor shared with you, you can try pausing your lecture every 10 minutes or so to try and summarize in your own words what's being said. If it's a really complex lecture, I'd pause it even sooner, maybe even every 2 or 3 minutes, to pause and say, do I understand the terms and the ideas that are being discussed here? Do I need to look up anything? Maybe some of these words I don't understand the meaning of, right? Do I need to backtrack to dig a little bit deeper so I understand the information being discussed? And that's really helpful, because what you don't want to do is get to the end of that lecture or video and find that you missed a lot of the key concepts that were being discussed, right? And then as you're reading and reviewing material, stop and ask yourself, why does this matter? Why am I learning this? How does this connect to the learning concepts in this course, right? Or am I making those connections and understanding them correctly? Also consider generating practice questions while you read. This can be really effective. Some textbooks or other resources even have built-in questions you can stop and ask yourself while reading. But if not, think of some questions you can stop and ask yourself. Consider those types of questions of, why does this matter? How is this all connected to what I'm learning in the course in general, right? You can also practice teaching the material to yourself or a study partner. You've probably heard that one of the most effective ways to learn is to have to teach it to somebody else, right? Consider stopping and sharing what you're learning with a roommate, or just perhaps tell yourself, hey, this is what I'm learning, and stop and reassess and then describe what you're learning to yourself. That can be really helpful. You can also consider taking notes as you're writing. One effective way to take notes is something called the Cornell method, where you divide your page into a couple sections, where you've got one section for keywords and cues, a section for notes, and a bottom section for summaries. This can be a really helpful way to look back on class notes after those lectures and activities and begin to quiz yourself and make sure that you're understanding what's being covered in your course, right? You can also consider using an outline method, right? You can use main topics as headers and have bullet points and all sorts of other good information in there. Overall, taking notes is a really effective way to help retain the information that you're learning, though. So that can be really helpful to try if that's something you haven't tried in an online course yet. So something else that can be really helpful with an online course and trying to remember the information that's being covered is summarization. Summarizing information really can help it stick into our brains and become long-term memories that we truly understand. So what is summarization, right? It's really going to be putting it into your own words and reconstructing the ideas that you're learning, again, in your own words, independently. So if you can't explain it, that means you don't know it well enough yet, right? So if you get to the point where you can summarize things for yourself, that's a really strong point to be at. Remember, you should lead with the key points. Before you begin summarizing, just begin identifying a couple key takeaways, right, that are important to have. And then keep those in the back of your mind and build your summary around those. You can also remember to utilize the review, recall, repeat method. And this is a really good when partnered with summarization. So think about revisiting that material that you summarized about 24 hours or a week after you initially wrote it, right? And then try and recall it and repeat it to test yourself and see if you still remember what you were previously learning. And it's okay if at any one of those given points you can't recall everything exactly or repeat it exactly. That just means you might need to go back and study a little bit more, which presents a great opportunity for further review of course material, right? So the third strategy we're going to talk about is cognitive load and staying sharp. I'm a firm believer that our brain has limits, right? If we ever feel overwhelmed and there's just too much on our plate to keep track of at once, it becomes really hard to study, right? So understanding cognitive load and making sure your brain doesn't feel beyond its limits can be really effective tools when trying to study in an online class. It helps make life and studying for that online class a little bit more manageable. So we're going to talk a little bit about some ways that you can manage that cognitive load. The first one we're calling chunk it. This is where you break complex topics into smaller little digestible chunks, right? Maybe you work on studying one topic at a time until you feel like you completely understand that before moving on to another topic. Or maybe one week you have assignments due in 3 online classes. But instead of working on all 3 simultaneously, you'll chunk it, work on one assignment at a time. That way at any given point, your mind only is focusing on that one assignment, and it makes it a little bit easier, again, to stay focused, to stay engaged, and give your best self, your best brain to that assignment that you're working on, right? Next, think about prioritizing what matters. So not all information that you're reading or studying is going to carry equal weight, right? Some information might simply be supporting information rather than the key concepts that are part of the significant learning objectives in a course. So to make sure that you're focusing on what matters most, I would definitely recommend looking at your teacher's learning objectives in a course or learning objectives for an assignment to know exactly what you're supposed to be accomplishing and focusing on in a given assessment or in a given course as a whole. Again, this can be really helpful to make sure that you're not getting stuck on a step of the process or a piece of information that might not be super critical to your outcome in the course, right? So think about what you can focus on to learn. Sometimes small bits of information can be just a little bit more helpful in the long run rather than focusing on everything as a whole, right? Think of it this way, you wouldn't try and memorize your entire textbook, right? Think about those key pieces in there that'll be most helpful to learn and focus on those. Also consider taking some strategic breaks. It's really important to take breaks every now and then to give your eyes a rest, to give your brain a rest, and make sure that you don't feel overwhelmed. It can be as simple as taking a 5-minute break after every hour that you work, right? Again, this helps reduce some strain on your eyes if you've been looking at a screen for too long, and it helps give your brain a little bit of a break, which can actually help improve your overall focus and the retention of the information that you're studying, which can actually be really helpful, right? So remember, if you're starting to feel overwhelmed, starting to feel tired, take a 5-minute break and then come back to it and see if your framework of mind is a little bit refreshed. Next, let's consider the power of participation, right? Participating in your class in an online format, like I already mentioned, might be a little bit tougher, but it's equally as rewarding as engaging and staying connected in a face-to-face course, right? This can be a really powerful way, again, to stay connected, but also to clarify course concepts and assessments and other materials, right? So think about discussion boards. Most online classes are going to have you engage in one or more discussion board activities throughout the course. This is an awesome way to build support and rapport with the students in your class, right? This can be a great way to get to know each other, to form study groups, to find connections with those peers so that you can all work on supporting each other. And you can also learn from each other, right? Take those assignments seriously when you have a discussion board activity, rather than just posting a couple words trying to get it out of the way. Go in, read as many of your peers' posts as you can. Engage with what they're writing and think through it and respond. You never know how you might find ways to connect and support each other. Also, remember to ask questions boldly. Your instructors, even in an online course, are super happy to support you and would be happy for you to reach out with questions, I assure you. So if you ever have a question, instead of sitting and being confused and feeling like you can't reach out to your instructor, I really encourage you, send them a message through Blackboard or send them an email and reach out to them with your questions. And I know they'll be happy to try and support you however they can. A lot of our online instructors are more than willing to meet with you in office hours if you happen to live close to campus, or if you live further away, they're often very happy to do virtual meetings with you through video platforms, right? So there's all sorts of ways that you can communicate with your instructors. Know that they're there to help you. And instructors are not going to see your questions as a sign of weakness. They're going to see them as a sign of engagement and be really glad that you reached out. So keep that in mind. If you have a question, reach out for help. And also remember, you can reach out to your classmates for help too. You know, if you've already engaged with peers on the discussion board and have made some of those connections, maybe by that point you feel comfortable reaching out to them too. And sometimes they can provide perspective depending on what your question may be. Also consider real-world application, right? So one of the most powerful ways to learn is to connect what you're learning, those like broad concepts, to real-world applications. Think about, how does what I'm learning connect to my life or my job or what I'm seeing on the news? How could I apply this in the real world, right? And that contextual anchoring really helps make that material you're learning more concrete, which helps improve your memory and retention of those topics, right? And then finally, as I already mentioned, consider doing some study groups, even in an online class. Remember that study groups can be very effective. When I've taken online classes before, we've had study groups that take place in the form of a Teams meeting or maybe just a group chat via text, right? But what matters is we have that support system in place where we can ask questions, where we can talk about what we're learning and engage with each other. That can be really helpful. Sometimes it's a matter of just maybe one or two of your classmates gathering together and working on an assignment. That can be very helpful. So think about some of the techniques that have worked in class before and try and think about how you could translate those to online learning. If maybe you found it helpful to have a study partner in class, find a study partner in your online class too, and I bet you'll see similar success with it. So as we wrap up today's session, I'd like us to take a look at our Pacer Ready Success Toolkit, right? Here's some materials that you can use to keep in mind to be successful in your next online class, right? So remember, let's have a reliable tech setup. In an online class, technology is crucial, right? In a face-to-face course, you might can get by for a while without a laptop or a computer, but in an online course, that connection is everything. So make sure that your laptop is charged when you need to work, that you have a reliable device to use, that you're backing up your work regularly. That can be really helpful to make sure you're not losing valuable work that you've spent a lot of time on, right? And if you do maybe have a device that isn't as reliable, make sure you're aware of some local locations where you could perhaps engage in your online course with a different device, right? For instance, if you live close to the USC Aiken campus, you could consider using our library. That way, if your computer ever crashes, you know, hey, I might not have a computer for a few days, but I can still go keep up to date with my work through the Greg Graniteville Library. Maybe if you don't live close, it's helpful to know a friend or a family member who has a laptop you could temporarily borrow if you ever need to, right? Sometimes those emergencies may arise, so having some backup plans can be really, really helpful there. And again, if those emergencies do ever arise for anything that's a little lengthier than a day or two, remember to reach out to your instructor and let them know. And they're usually very supportive and happy to try and help you come up with solutions on how to stay engaged in the class and still succeed, right? Also, consider platform proficiency, right? So while having those devices is important, right, we also need to know how to use the systems and the processes on your device. Things like our learning management system, which is Blackboard, or maybe Microsoft Word if you're writing an essay, right? All of that is really crucial to your overall success as a student. So if you utilize any of these platforms, especially Blackboard as an online student, take your time, explore that system, make sure that you know how everything works. And if you have questions, be sure to reach out to your instructor or someone else on campus to get the necessary help learning how to use them to their fullest potential so that you don't run into any trouble, right? For instance, if it's your first online class and you might not know how to submit, an assignment or activity, that could really derail your participation in a course. So be sure to reach out ahead of time and make sure that you receive all of the information you need to know how to use those platforms effectively. Also, make sure that you have a clear understanding of your instructor's communication plan in a course. Instructors' communication preferences may vary, so when you are taking an online class, make sure to read your syllabus carefully to find out how your professor likes to be reached. Some instructors prefer the messaging platform in Blackboard, others prefer email, some others have even different methods other than that. So check your syllabus to see. For instance, if your instructor prefers email and you're messaging them in Blackboard, you might have a slightly more delayed response than if you message them on their preferred platform, right? So again, don't ever hesitate to reach out to your instructors. Just know where and how they like to be reached to be most effective. Also, ensure that you have reliable internet access. This is really important, right? Because when you're taking an online class, everything's going to be housed right within Blackboard, right? So you need to have reliable internet access to get to Blackboard itself so that you can read your course materials, so that you can submit your homework and activities and stay up to date with everything. So just like how you want a backup for maybe if your laptop or computer were to fail, consider having a backup for Wi-Fi. Maybe if the Wi-Fi goes out at your home or your dorm, you know that you can always go to the local coffee shop or the local library and access their internet instead. Again, really good to have a backup plan because it never fails when you're working on an assignment at the last minute that something like that might happen. And having a backup plan in mind, again, can be really helpful to help you stay right on track. So remember that if we build sustainable habits, it's really going to result in the success over time in your degree. So students with strong time management skills can receive up to 87% better grades. Active learners can retain information up to 3 times more effectively than others, right? So think about how you can build all of these habits over time. Don't focus too much on, one given week or one given course. If something so far hasn't gone well for you in an online class, know that that's okay and that there's still room for progress in future courses. You can begin building those sustainable habits that will add up to improve your performance over time. And before you know it, you'll be excelling in online classes and be able to succeed in that online format. Consider really building those habits. They're going to be more effective than hacks rather than cramming for stuff at the last minute or trying all of those weird study hacks. Instead, just focus on, again, that slow build of the course information so that you're ready to go by the time that you have tests or final exams at the end of the course, right? And finally, remember to reflect back on what works and what doesn't. If you're in an online class this semester, think about what's worked well so far, maybe what didn't work so well, and how you can fix that going forward, or what methods you'd want to continue using going forward, and take it from there. But overall, remember that USCA is here to help you succeed in your online courses. If you have any questions about how to do so, please reach out, especially to your instructors in your online courses. I know they'll be happy to help you any way they can. Thank you guys for coming today and for tuning in to this instance of Pacer Ready to learn how to learn online. Thanks again for coming, everyone. Have a good day.